Welcome to Bonding and Beer. This is your host, Rolando Nuñez, and we are doing episode number 35, and the topic is avoiding issues. Let's go. What has Rolando been up to in this past few weeks? Well, I've been up to a few things. I had travel quite a bit, but I will say that there was an event that I truly enjoyed. It's called the ASDA, American Society of Dental Aesthetics. We had a meeting in Orlando, and it was a lot of fun. Meeting up with, the usual suspects over there, guys that I've known for, over 20 years, but also being able to meet a bunch of new dentists that are joining this society and getting their feet wet in the whole, aesthetics, dental aesthetics world. Of course, I went to the bar and I met this guy. He was quite interesting dude, and he was I want to say strong dude, fine mustache, very good looking guy, very handsome. His name is Frank. So I asked him, hey Frank, where are you from? And he's like, New York. And I'm like, okay. He did sound like he was from New York. And I asked him, so like, what is your background? Like, your parents, where are they from? New York being such a melting pot of people. And he said, I'm Italian. He does this. Bro, it was so good. He said, I'm Italian. So I love Frank. Frank and I had a great time. We drank probably a little bit too much, him and his friends. And there was a bunch of people, bunch of young guys, really enjoyed it. And I had a great time. So Frank, if you're listening to this, because I think you subscribe to the podcast, shout out to Frank from New York. Super cool dude. Listen, remember to like, to comment, and to subscribe. So come on, show Jeremy, the producer, some love. Provide him with the proper, emotion so he can keep on doing a fantastic job. Let's freaking go. Today's topic come from the types of questions we're getting. We're getting, more questions as we move forward, which we really appreciate. Feel free to ask any questions. And we're getting questions that are similar, similar questions. People have similar questions. And this happens all across the board in restorative dentistry. So we decided to put together like a collage of questions and talk about these topics and how to basically avoid them, these issues that people are asking about. Our topic today is avoiding issues, what to do to avoid some of the issues that people have expressed through their questions. So the first issue we're going to share how to avoid is post-op sensitivity. The second one is about zirconia debonding, how to avoid that. And most important, something that is related to zirconia debonding, saliva contamination, how to avoid that. So we're going to be covering these three topics within one episode. We're going to provide information on how to avoid each one of them. But most important, we're going to have a beer, all right? Before we get any deeper, let's crack this beer open. Let's see what Jeremy, the producer, brought us today. Today, we have a beer called Ninja Dust. This is a hazy IPA, 6.5% alcohol content. It's an interesting can. It has a penguin that is wearing kind of like a mask, So he looks like a cat burglar. So he's stealing something, probably your soul after a few of these beers, right? This one is from a brewing company called One Barrel out of Door County in Wisconsin. And, being from Chicago, living in Chicago, I have gone to Door County many times. It is a wonderful place to go and do some camping and be outdoors. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. Whether you go during the summer, during the spring, during the fall, even the winter. Door County, I love it. So this beer was brought to us by someone who works here at Bisco. She's new, and she found out about our podcast and our love for beer. Shout out to Jessica Cecile for bringing Ninja Dust to us here. So we're going to describe it. It says Ninja Dust is a hazy IPA that is bursting with Citra, which is a type of hop, Mosaic and Centennial hops, giving the brew an easy drinking citrus forward hop profile. So this is going to be, a little bit fruity, or citrus, and of course hoppy. So, thank you again, Jessica, for bringing this thing to us, and we're going to crack it open. We're going to put it next to the microphone. Hopefully, Jeremy, the producer, didn't shake it. Let's see what's what. Oh, yes. Yes, that sound is the sound of happiness. I can smell the hops from here. I am, I don't know, maybe like 5-6 inches away from the can, and I can feel the hops from here. So this is going to be fantastic. Let's do a pour. All right, let's pour it. Of course, we got the haters, we got the unprofessionals, we got the amateurs, we got a bunch of people just waiting for this moment for me to screw it up. And it's not happening, my friend. This pour was perfect. Professional. I'm not joking. If you're listening to this, you should go and watch it. It was just perfect. Perfect head, 2 fingers thick, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful hazy beer. So the beer is a little bit like light yellow. It is hazy, so it matches the description. What does it smell like? Yes, there is definitely some sort of citrus in there, right? But also, you can smell the hops. Now, let's give it a taste.
Sip, sip, sip.
Jeremy, the producer. I gotta tell you, well, you're gonna have to start using some beeping in this here episode. This is hoppy as beeping. I'm telling you. Sorry. There's going to be some, what do you call it? Censorship going on here. Oh, my dear Lord, this is very hoppy. I love this beer.
Sip, sip, sip.
This is great. Again, shout out to Jessica Cecile. She did a fantastic job. Now, let's get into today's topic. Let's go. So the first issue that we want to avoid right now is post-up sensitivity. And we have an episode on post-up sensitivity alone. All right, so if you really want to dive into that, you can go and listen or watch that episode. However, let's just provide some context. If you are an individual that likes to do total etch, which is fine, it's a fine bonding technique. Okay, you're going to apply phosphoric acid, you're going to remove the smear layer, demineralize the dentin, and expose collagen fibers. Now, when you expose collagen fibers, these fibers need to remain moist, okay? Because if they're moist, when you apply your bonding agent, the bonding agent will penetrate the collagen fibers and also seal the dentinal tubes. And you want to do that because inside of each dentinal tube, there is something called the odontoblast process. And this odontoblast process goes all the way to the odontoblast, which is located at the periphery of the pulp. So whenever there is a change in pressure, temperature, or pH, there's going to be movement, there's going to be displacement of the odontoblast process, and that is going to lead to sensitivity because that displacement, that stimulus just travels through the process all the way to the odontoblast, and the reaction is pain. Okay? This happens when you're not able to seal the tubes correctly, okay, and accordingly. And one of the things that can cause this issue is when you rinse your etch for whatever amount of time you decide to rinse, and you leave some, extra water, inside the prep. You want to get rid of that extra water. Some people use air, okay? And when people use air, that air could collapse the collagen. And now the collagen, instead of being moist and ready to absorb the adhesive, what's going to happen is going to act as a wall. A wall that will not allow for the adhesive to properly penetrate, impregnate the collagen fiber network that has been exposed by the phosphoric acid. Okay? If you're not able to penetrate this network, you're going to have issues on sealing the dentinal tube. So some of these tubes are going to be exposed, not properly sealed. So when you place your composite and when you place, when you finish the whole restoration, the patient bites, and there is a change in pressure that can lead to odontoblast process displacement, which can lead to post-op sensitivity. So air will collapse the collagen, and you want to avoid that. There is so much research out there that talks about the collapse of the collagen due to air. So a pro tip over here, use suction, high vac, to remove the excess water after rinsing your phosphoric acid. Some people like to use a foam pellet. Some people like to use a cotton pellet. That's fine. But you want to, if you have a high vac suction, just use that to remove the excess water, okay? And that will guarantee that you can actually achieve moist dentin that will receive the adhesive and properly seal the dentinal tubules. I've heard from people that, post-op sensitivity is a thing of the past. That's not true, my guy. That is not true. I lecture all over the place. I'm one of the people, at least that I know of, that travels a lot, not only in the U.S., but also overseas, okay? I lecture for a living. And every time I lecture and I get to talk about bonding to the tooth structure, I will ask, how many of you guys have placed a composite in the past month, past week in the posterior region? A bunch of people will raise their hand. And then I ask them, how many of you guys have experienced post-op sensitivity? A bunch of people will raise their hand, right? I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and the answer hasn't changed. People still experience sensitivity. So you need to properly manage etched dentin after you remove the etchant from the prep. And a way to do that is to control the excess water, remove it by using high vac and leaving the dentin properly moist. Let's go. My second issue, or the second issue that was brought to us, is about zirconia debonding, right? But in order to understand zirconia debonding and why this is an issue, we need to basically what is the term? Acknowledge that you can bond to zirconia. It is wild, Jeremy, that at this point in 2025, you still got some people. You got a couple of dudes and dudettes who are telling me, well, you really can't bond to zirconia. Well, those people who think that bonding to zirconia is fiction, that MDP doesn't do anything, haven't read anything in the past 20 years, okay? And the reason why they will say these things is because even though they're trying, some MDP-containing primer or MDP-containing self-adhesive cement, they're not achieving bond. Well, here we go. You can't blame the bonding, the efficacy of the MDP on bonding to the zirconia substrate. You cannot blame that when you really need to look at your prep. So let's think about conventional crowns that a lot of people are still doing, all right? When you do a crown prep, and your crown prep is short, okay? And your crown prep has a taper, let's say, larger than 10 degrees. And you decide to use an MDP containing cement, such as Theracem or something like Panavia. It already contains MDP. It will bond to zirconia. But when you bond that crown, that's not going to hold. It's not going to hold. And it's not going to hold because your prep is not, let's say, it's not retentive. It's not retentive. Now, bonding to zirconia has been proven optically by the change in the contact angle. It's hydrophobic after you sandblast it, but then when you apply your primer, it turns into hydrophobic. It's hydrophilic when you sandblast it, and then it turns to hydrophobic when you apply your primer. It has been proven by physical testing, which is shear bond testing. It also has been proven chemically by measuring the molecular weight of the compounds that are basically formed after the MDP reacts with the zirconia. So there's plenty of literature to prove zirconia bonding. But the fact that you can bond to the zirconia doesn't mean that now that prep is going to be perfect and is going to withstand, that crown without any issues, regardless of the height and taper. So preps need to be high enough. They got to have, 3 millimeters or above in height. They got to have a taper of about 10 degrees. And then you can use something like Theracem or Panavia or Speedsem or Reliex Universal, which are all cements that contain MDP that could bond to zirconia. I had a doctor, he contacted me and said, hey, my zirconia crown fell off even though I did everything you told me. I'm like, why don't you send me a picture of the prep?
Sip, sip, sip.
And then he sends me the prep, and the prep had the height of a nickel. I mean, what are we doing? It had the height of a nickel, which is the thickest coin in U.S. currency. So we can't be doing that. You can't expect for a self-adhesive cement that contains MDP that will bond to the zirconia to basically hold on. It won't. So there are other things, clinical assessments, that need to be done in order to guarantee that the restoration will stay in place. And if you add properly bonding to zirconia, and then we're going to have a much better restoration. So on this one, think about the prep. Clinically assess the height and the taper of your prep. If it's too short, you need to do a bonding procedure on the prep. Apply a bonding agent, and then you're going to be fine. But now let's talk about contamination of zirconia. That's our third issue. Let's freaking go. When you get your zirconia restoration from the lab, and let's assume that the lab is doing the sandblasting for you. So you get it from the lab, and you try it in to see fit, to see if, shade. You can even check occlusion. Try-in basically leads to saliva contamination. Now your zirconia substrate is contaminated with saliva. And saliva contains phosphate lipids, which will react with the zirconia substrate. And now when you rinse it with water, you put it in the ultrasonic machine, it's not going to remove that contaminated surface. And now, when you apply your MDP has nowhere to react. So there is no bonding. So when these things fail, of course people are going to say, well, you really can't bond to zirconia. Well, if you're not aware that saliva actually contaminates zirconia, and then you are going to fail over and over again.
Sip, 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 sip.
There are so many articles that talk about how saliva hinders, the reaction, the bonding between MDP and zirconia. so many articles out there. It has been widely studied. Okay, and there's so many ways that you can remove that contaminated substrate. You can remove it by using a physical device. You can remove the contaminated surface physically by you sandblasting it. Okay, so you will tell the lab not to sandblast it, and then you will receive it, try it in, and then you sandblast it, and then you're good to go. Because you removed that contaminated surface physically. But also you can remove it clinically by using a zirconia cleaner. Here at Bisco, we have one called Zirclean, which comes in a syringe, comes in a gel. You apply it, leave it for 20 seconds after trying. You try it in, apply it, leave it for 20 seconds, rinse it, and then you apply your primer. Or you move forward with your MDP-containing self-adhesive cement. Either way, you're cleaning the zirconia, and that is a must. Okay? That is a must in order to achieve bonding to zirconia. Now, here at Bisco, we had, when we develop our primer for zirconia, it's called Z Prime, MDP containing primer. We did all the testing here in the lab, and then it went out to the world, and we started getting phone calls. Oh, this is not working, this product, things are debonding. And you're like, well, no, what do you mean debonding? There is no bond. And we're like, yes, there is. And people will say, well, no, this product sucks. And then, I wanted to say, no, you suck. But then we can't do that because that's not professional. You know what I'm saying? Of course, neither the clinician nor us at that time knew that saliva contaminated the zirconia. We found out later on. So a solution that we provided was to, once you get the zirconia restoration, sandblast it from the lab, you're going to apply your primer first. You get it from the lab already sandblasted. You apply your primer first, and that way you are changing the substrate. You're making the reaction happen. You're bonding to the zirconia. So when you try in, saliva is not going to touch zirconia, and it's not going to contaminate anything. All you got to do is rinse it away, and you're good to go. However, that requires that people lose their level of paranoia, because when they think that, some people will think, oh, saliva just destroys and contaminates everything. Well, with zirconia, that is kind of true, but if you apply your primer first and seal it, bond to it, sealing it, saliva is not going to touch it. So that was what we proposed, and it is in our IFU. However, other companies, like Ivoclar, came out with a zirconia cleaner called Ivoclean.
Sip, sip, sip.
And people preferred to purchase another product and add an extra step in order to feel comfy. They wanted to feel comfy. You know what I'm saying? Because they were freaking out because, oh, I got saliva. Oh, my God. You know what? I'm just going to clean it chemically, which is totally okay. So we decided, you know what? If you cannot fight them, you join them. So we created Zirclean. We also have an option for those people who don't feel comfortable applying the primer first. There you go. Okay? Now remember, if the prep is retentive and the substrate is clean, bonding is totally achievable in a very predictable manner. Now, if your prep is short, but your substrate is clean, bonding to the zirconia is predictable. But you need to check on that prep in order to achieve, in order to determine, clinically assess if you need to use a bonding agent on your prep for that restoration to stay in place. Saliva contamination can be avoided by applying the primer first after sandblasting before try-in, or it can be eliminated. So once you try it in, you use your cleaner, such as Ivoclean, Katana Clean, or Zirclean from Bisco. All right? So there you have it, how to avoid saliva contamination of zirconia. It is an issue. But you don't need to suffer. You don't need to think about it. All you got to do is make sure that you understand your workflow and use the proper procedure, and you're going to be fine. Let's go, my guys. All right, man. Now we're going to do the beer review. And as you can see, I've been, checking this down, during the episode. And I got to tell you, I am happy. I'm a happy camper right now. This is a fantastic beer, Ninja Dust. So, what do I think about this beer? I think I already said it. This is a good one. This is a good one. This will make you feel good. Absolutely.
Sip, sip.
They didn't match the description. Citra, Mosaic, and Centennial hops. I don't have the palate to differentiate the different types of hops. All I know, if it is hoppy. If it's hoppy, it's going to be, bitter. It's going to have my salivary glands, basically contract. And it's going to make me feel like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. And also, in the back of my throat, I can feel the bitterness just lingering in there. It doesn't disappear. Right now, I can feel it. So this is a good one, right? This is a good, and now it says, all these hops give the brew an easy drinking citrus forward hop profile. It is citrus. It is hoppy. Is it easy drinking? Yes, because you're feeling great as you're drinking it. What's not to like? Come on. What is the score I'm going to give this puppy? I got to tell you, I'm going to give it 4.4. 4.4 to Ninja Dust. If the guys from One Barrel Brewing Company happen to stumble into this review, feel free to, reach out so we can do a little something together. Let's freaking go. So now we're going to go through some questions. If you have a question, send it to bondingandbeer@gmail.com. Find us on Instagram @bondingandbeer. Go to YouTube, Bonding and Beer. You can ask a question there. You can send us a direct message. You can send us an email. It doesn't really matter. So here's our first question from Dr. Bernardino Bojorquez. Now, Bernardino is definitely not from North Dakota. You know what I'm saying? I doubt it. Highly doubt it. But Bernardino is one of my peoples. And he goes, my zirconia crowns continue to fall off. What am I doing wrong? Well, the first thing you're going to do, my dear Bernardino, is when something falls off, is look at the cement. Where is it? Is it on the tooth or is it on the substrate, on the restoration? If it's on the tooth, that means that the bonding to the restoration is faulty. Something went wrong. It probably got contaminated by saliva. Or you didn't use the proper primer. Okay, or your self-adhesive cement didn't have MDP. Now, if the cement is stuck to the restoration and your prep is clean, that means there were some issues with the bonding of the cement to that prep, right? Maybe you needed a bonding agent. Maybe your prep was too short. These are clinical assessments. So what went wrong? It all depends where their cement is. If you ask the question, my zirconia crowns continue to fall off, but the cement is always on the crown, on the restoration, okay, and then we can talk about the prep. Maybe you need to use a dental bonding agent. Maybe your crowns are too short, But if the cement is on the prep and not on the restoration, maybe you need to clean your restoration. Maybe you need to use an MDP containing primer. Maybe what kind of cement are you using? Does it contain MDP? All these things need to be considered. So it's difficult to answer something if I don't have enough information. But I think I provided an interesting answer there based upon the, how these things fail. Second question from Katie Parrish. Can I remove saliva when an ultrasonic cleaner? From zirconia, no. I mean, you remove some of it, but no. In order to restore the substrate to fully achieve proper bonding, you need to use a cleaner or a sandblaster, one of the two. You need to remember that you have to establish what is your workflow. Once you establish your workflow, like, after you do the scan or take the impression and send it to the lab, it's like, tell the lab to sandblast it, or tell the lab not to sandblast it because I have a sandblaster. And then from there, you go like, okay, if the lab has a sandblaster, do I apply the primer first? Or do I try and clean it with Zirconia or Ivoclean and then apply the primer? Or if I have the sandblaster, I get it from the lab, I try it in, and then I sandblast it and remove the saliva contamination. So it all depends on what your workflow is. And that will definitely provide you much better, what is the term? Predictability. Because if you follow your workflow and you have the proper tools and the proper materials, you're going to be just fine. Question number 3 from Cliff McConnell. What is your favorite part of Thanksgiving? Okay, so
Sip, sip, sip.
Thanksgiving is a holiday that, for someone like me who is a foreigner from Venezuela, right? We learn to appreciate once we come to the United States. And I usually spend Thanksgiving, I gather with a bunch of other people in their homes who are also Venezuelan. That to me is my favorite part of it because, as Venezuelans or as a foreigner, it's not Venezuelan, as a foreigner, you embrace the holiday because there is always something to be thankful about, So we gather, we celebrate, we're thankful, we cook, we keep the tradition. A lot of these people that I spend my Thanksgiving with have children. And these children are learning about Thanksgiving, which is an American tradition, even though they are the children of foreigners who will also pass on their own traditions. But now you have a melting pot of traditions. I think that everywhere you go, you need to embrace the tradition. And that way you will find somewhat a sense of belonging. So to me, the most beautiful part of Thanksgiving, or my favorite part of Thanksgiving, is being able to share with people, to gather with people, and to be thankful about just the fact that we are there celebrating. Okay? Not a big fan of, some weird casserole dish. Not a big fan. Green bean casserole, not my thing. However, you got to do what you got to do. You got to eat what you got to eat. You got to enjoy what you got to enjoy. And you got to be thankful for those things that make life beautiful. That's my answer to Dr. McConnell. All right? Now, that wraps up the episode of Bonding and Beer. Be sure to like, to comment, to subscribe, to follow Instagram, YouTube, bondingandbeer@gmail.com. Next episode, we're going to be talking about 3D printed resins that have become extremely popular. So make sure that you send us your questions about 3D printed resins. All right? And hopefully I'll have an answer for you. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Rolando Nuñez. Jeremy, the producer, is here with us, making sure everything goes smoothly. And I will see you in our next episode. Let's freaking go. Ninja dust! How long did that take?